Welcome to the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast, brought to you by guitar-Zoom.com. If you want to improve your guitar playing, keep listening. If you want to improve even faster, go to guitar-Zoom.com, where you'll find all of Steve's premium courses, masterclasses, and memberships that'll help you quickly and easily improve your playing. Now here's your host, Steve Stine.
We're going to be talking more about blues, of course, for the next few sessions here. We've had so many questions that we decided we would expand this and just keep going because it's a lot of fun for me too. So today we're going to be talking about is phrasing. All right. So as people filter in here, we're going to be talking about phrasing. Hey, Omar. Hey, Michael. Thank you. Sounds good. And the video looks good. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. Yeah. So we're going to talk about phrasing, trying to put everything that we've been talking about together. Hey, Leah. Let's see here. Byram Rollins. Perfect is here. And Roy is here. Christopher's here. Thank you so much. Awesome. George is here from Oxnard, California. Awesome. Let's see here. John Waghorn. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Jay from Texas is here. This is great. Okay. Thank you for putting your names in there so that way I can see who you are and we can correspond that way. Rabbit is here. Haven't seen that guitar before. This is a Floyd Rose custom guitar. So Floyd sells guitars as well, and this is one from Floyd. I played it back at NAMM last year. I did some stuff at his booth at NAMM, if you know what NAMM is, and Floyd and I hooked up. Great guy. Amazing guitar neck. This guitar has such an incredible guitar neck on it. It's a lot of fun to play. Hey, Marty. Marty's here. Martin is here. So what we're doing today is we're celebrating, of course, creative guitar or creative blues soloing. It's a course that I have that has just come out. So if you're interested in checking that out, there's going to be a link in the chat somewhere for you to see creative blues soloing. Please do me a favor, check it out, see if it's something for you. At the very least, do me a favor and subscribe to the Steve Stine YouTube channel, the GuitarZoom YouTube channel. As always, share a video if you find something you like. It always helps us out enormously. Ron is here, Colin is here, Bob Anderson from North Carolina is here, Gary in Southern California. All right, so looks like we have quite a few people already, so let's go ahead and get started. So what I want to talk about today is phrasing, and there's a couple different ways we're going to approach this. So before we start actually jamming and taking everything that we've done in the previous sessions and bringing them together, hello, Dan, hello, John, hello, Mike. Thank you. John says, love your guitar. That's awesome. Charlie is here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. When I was a kid and I was first learning how to play, the way I learned how to play for the most part, I had a few lessons. It didn't go very well, and I wound up just learning how to play by ear, which was really beneficial in some ways and somewhat detrimental in other ways. But that's how I did it. So what I would do is I would take albums and I would learn how to play, and yes, they were albums at the time. So I would take records, and what I would try and do is learn all the songs on one record on one side. That way I didn't have to keep changing the records and all that sort of thing. So I would just try and learn everything. And oftentimes if there was a song that I didn't really know, what I would do is I would try and jam to the song. And one of the records that I remember doing this a lot with was Back in Black by AC/DC. So this puts us around, 1980, I'm not sure what, but it was probably 1982 for me, 83, 84, something like that. A little bit later than when the album came out, just because I wasn't playing guitar quite then. But I love that album so much that that's the one I'm going to talk about. So what I would do is I would take that album and I would put it on, and let's say we're listening to Back in Black. I would try and jam in between Brian Johnson's singing. So when he would say something in between there, what I would try and do is throw in some sort of a lick, right? Now, this is where the beginning of our phrasing conversation is going to start, is when I would do that, I would have two options. Either I would try and replicate some element of what he just sang within the context of the lick or the sequence, whatever you want to call it, that I would try and play right after he would sing, right? Yeah, Back in Black came out in 80, but I wasn't playing then. So I started playing in 83. So it was probably 84, 85 when I started doing what I was doing with it. So that's one way, is you try and replicate some element, whether it's a rhythmic element, whether it's a melodic element, something like that. I would try and do in between some of his phrases. So for whatever reason, I would try not to step on his singing. So if he was singing, I wouldn't try and play, right? I was thinking, like, if I was on stage and I was Angus Young or I was in the band, I wouldn't play just over everything that he's singing. I would try and wait till he's done singing, and then I would put something in there. So that was one thing that I would do, is I would either try and replicate a rhythm of something that he just did or a melody of something he would sing, or here's the other thing. I wouldn't. I would just put in a cool lick. I would try and put in something that just made the song sound a bit cooler. So the first thing I want you to think about is when you're soloing, and this is in a context where maybe you're soloing with another guitar player, you're soloing back and forth, or maybe you're soloing with a singer and you're trying to do something. So the first thing that you do is you start thinking about how you're going to phrase relative to somebody else or more than one person, right? Because if you remember in the last session, we were talking about how the misconception we have with jam tracks or backing tracks that we find is that they're 8 or 9 minutes long, and we're trying to fill 8 or 9 minutes of soloing, trying to make it exciting. And there's very few people on the planet that could actually make a 9-minute blues, 12-bar blues progression sound exciting for 9 minutes. I love Joe Bonamassa and Steve Vai and a million other people. I'm not sure I just want to listen to them solo for 9 straight minutes without something else going on. Maybe I do, I don't know. But the point is, we are set up for failure by thinking we're supposed to solo for 9 minutes and it's supposed to be exciting the entire time. Oftentimes what we're doing in the real world is we're playing a solo within the context of a song that's maybe 10 or 20 or even 30 seconds long. We're not soloing for 5 minutes every single time we play a song on stage, right? We're playing a song with a band and a singer, and we have our place to do our solo. So we're going to listen to a few songs today, a few jam tracks, and we're going to think about some stuff today while we do that. But the headspace that you put yourself in is a little bit different than just jamming for 5 straight minutes or 6 straight minutes and expecting it all to be great. So if you try and do what I'm talking about, where you find a song that you like, and maybe you're doing one of my favorite songs, which I always play the riff to, is see? So I might take something like that, which is Just Got Paid, right? By ZZ Top or whoever it might be from. And I'm thinking, just got paid today, got me a pocket full of change. And then I'm going to put something in there, right? Am I going to put a... Or am I going to put a... Or am I just going to put a little... Okay. Quentin says it sounds like I'm underwater. Is anybody else getting that problem with the audio? Because I've got all the settings the same way I've had them the entire time. But let me know if you're finding any issues with the audio. Okay. And then just put it up in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully just let me know. I'm going to keep talking and I'll kind of... Your guitar doesn't sound good. But it sounded on the guitar for a minute. Audio is fine. Okay. Guitar is a little muted. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll do the best we can. Okay. All right. Perfect. We'll just keep going. Thank you, everybody. We'll just keep going and do the best we can. So if you think about that song, Just Got Paid, and he says, just got paid today, got me a pocket full of change. And then right there, you've got a little space where you can jam something, right? So maybe you're going to put in something that you really like, or you're going to think of something that fits the vocal line or something like that. So that's the first thing I want you to think about with phrasing. Because if you're, let's say you're soloing with 2 different people, like you're in a band and there's another guitar player and you're going to solo with that guitar player. So here comes the part where you two are going to go back and forth, okay? So what we want here is, if you think about this thing that's happening between these 2 guitar players, you can think about it as a battle, but I've never really tried to think about it as that. I always think about it as let's try and do something where we elevate the energy and then maybe de-escalate that energy, right? I've always thought of a solo, especially a longer solo, as being an ebb and flow. It gets more intense and then it comes down a little bit. Then it gets more intense and then it comes down a little bit. Okay? So that's the way I think about phrasing in general. But if I was playing with another guitar player, that's something that we would be doing. Maybe the other guitar player does something. I'm in E minor right now. Just Got Paid was in there. So if I'm in E minor, so the other guitar player does just something like that. Okay, so the first thing I think about is the register in which they're playing. Because if I come up here and I start doing, I'm way different than what they're doing. Because that other guitar player might be just trying to build something small like that in this lower register. So when I come in, I might try and maybe a little bit higher, but then drop down in there. And then that person comes back with a... And then I do... whatever. So that's what we're usually trying to do, is something like that, where we're building all of these different things back and forth, okay? So now we're going to look at some backing tracks here. And with these backing tracks, as I play them, and again, hopefully the audio will be okay enough, at least enough for you to hear. Trying to do all this in my studio and then stream it out to you takes a little bit of work, and you just never know how everything's going to work. But we'll do the best we can. So Leah says, what's the best way to improve creativity and phrasing? Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. So let's say I'm going to play this track, and the first thing I start thinking about, now there's no other guitar player, it's just me, but I'm going to start thinking about the groove, the subdivision options I have, of course the scale, the key, right? If it's minor, I'm playing more minor. If it's major, I can play major or minor, which we talked about, all those kinds of things. And of course, I go through all that stuff in creative blues soloing. There's all kinds of stuff we talk about, okay? But as I'm listening to it, that's what I'm trying to think about. And then I'm also going to think about my limitations as a guitar player. Now, if I'm in practice mode, I can develop all these things, right? I can practice and stop the music and practice a particular lick or an idea or a phrase or a scale position or whatever it is I'd like to do. When I'm on stage, I don't have that luxury. So when I'm on stage, the difference is I'm going to try and lean on my positive skills. So I'm not worried about whether or not I can or can't do a certain thing. If I'm worried that I might not be able to execute it, I might not play it if I'm on stage, or if I'm at home, I can practice all these things, right? And that's what I want to think about. So let me show you this. What I'm going to do is take this here, just play this first one. This is a straight groove in the key of A. So let's just listen to it a little bit. Nothing fancy going on here. So here we go. Now, hopefully you can hear that okay. Let me know if you can hear that okay. Okay, right? Okay, perfect. So we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, this is in the key of A, so we're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and dot, 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 dot. So that's the first thing I establish is my groove a swing or a shuffle, right? Or is it straight? So I identify right away that this, of course, is straight. So bum, 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 dot, 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 dot. Yeah, Mr. Smith says could be slightly louder, and I'm always going to opt for a little less loud just so things don't distort. So you can always turn them up if you need to, but I'm always trying to make sure everything's low enough to where I'm not distorting on anything, okay? So that's the first thing I think about is at this tempo, I've got bum, 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 da, 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 da. Those are my options. So then I've got to think about my ability in the key of A of going... right? Because those are my three options straight off the bat. I have other rhythmic options, but those are the first subdivision options I've got are just doing a quarter note, an eighth note, and a 16th, right? Now, you might be able to do the quarter notes and the eighth notes, but you think, wow, those 16ths are just too fast, though. I can't do da 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 da. Okay, so here's the trick to that, though. First of all, obviously, you can practice and develop that ability, right? But in the meantime, maybe what you do is you just do some 16th note touches by doing some hammer-ons or pull-offs, just here and there. So you dabble, you dip your toe in the water of 16th notes by just doing a... things like that, where you can just move into the 16th note world. Maybe you're not picking everything. Maybe you're not doing that, right? But you can take your eighth notes, and when you want your 16ths, you can throw in some of those, okay? So that's the first thing I'm figuring out. I've got the key. Because it's in the key of A, I could use A major, I could use A minor, I could use a combination of the two, I could parallel solo that we've talked about before, and of course it's in the guitar course, creative blues soloing, all that kind of stuff. But now I've got these levels of subdivision that I can deal with. So as the music plays, and again, hopefully you'll be able to hear both of us, the jam track and myself at the same time, but just do the best you can. So I've got see, I'm not doing anything fancy with the scale. I'm just playing straight pentatonic here because I'm not focusing on my melody right now. I'm not focusing on that. What I'm focusing on are my rhythm skills, my ability to subdivide with what I'm given as a jam track or I'm on stage or whatever it is. The first thing my brain does is go, do I know my scale options, which we already talked about, and do I know my rhythmic options? So now I've got some rhythmic options, okay? So as I'm doing this now, the next thing I start thinking about is trying to chop what I'm doing into sentences, which is really for me what phrasing is. Okay, phrasing is all about when you're reading a really good book, okay, or you're listening to a really great speaker, motivational speaker, or whatever it might be, okay? The trick is to speak dynamically, which we've talked about, right? Loud or soft or with energy or subtle, different kinds of things like that. And the other thing is that when you speak, you try and make sure that your sentences are different sizes. Right? So sometimes you have long sentences, sometimes you have very short sentences. Sometimes you end those sentences with a period, which means you stop. And on guitar, what that means is that's a stop. Okay? A comma would be this. Okay? I'm still playing. My fingers aren't moving, but the note is still existing. The listener is still hearing the sound. That's a big difference between stopping and pausing, you see? So we want to think about that when we phrase. If we're just playing the entire time, even if we're just pausing, the listener never gets a chance for space, right? So we want to be able to stop sometimes when we're playing too. So I'm going to start this track over again. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to move around thinking about sentences, dynamics, okay, and stopping versus pausing, period versus comma, right? Okay, so I'm thinking about these phrases. Ba-da-dum-bum-bum, boom-bum-ba-da-bum, right? And as I do that, I'm aware that I don't want everything to go dun-dun-da-da-dun, dun-dun-da-da-dun, right? Dun-dun-dun. I don't want it to be the same all the time. Whenever I say that to people, I always think of, if you've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, when the teacher's going, Bueller, 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 right? It's just the same thing over and over, and everybody in the classroom is just tired and bored, and right? That's what we want to try and avoid, is that thing. So as we play, we can build energy with the notes that we play and different kinds of things like that, but we can also build energy by thinking about our phrasing and what I'm going to call a tree that grows, right? We think about whole notes and half notes and quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes and this sort of thing. And then oftentimes our argument or our discussion goes into this argument of slow versus fast and shred versus not shred. And there's a million more notes in one note. And I don't get involved in any of those things. All I want you to do is enjoy your playing. I don't have an agenda. I love to play fast and I love to play slow. And I love to play blues and I love to play rock and I love to play acoustic and love to play metal. It just depends on the mood I'm in. Okay. But I try and respond appropriately to the style of music that I'm playing or the song that I'm playing to try and make it fit so it sounds authentic as best I can. Okay. I'm a rock player that loves to play blues and loves to play metal, but I grew up playing rock and roll. I'm writing the Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Ozzy, all of that stuff is where I grew up. And that's what I learned how to play with, are all of those players. And then I shifted out into different places and learned all kinds of different things. And so for me, it isn't really about a genre as it is just the enjoyment of playing the guitar itself and trying to learn to respond, which is what phrasing is, learning to respond to the music that you're hearing, not just playing by route because you learned this lick or you learned this pattern or you learned this scale position or whatever. Those are all important. And again, if you haven't watched my other live sessions, you totally should. Because remember, I talked about these different buckets of practice, right? Well, now we're over here in this creative bucket versus the fundamental rudimentary bucket or the theory bucket. We're over here in the creative bucket trying to respond to the music, okay? In whatever way it works for you, whatever scale you want, whatever speed you want. But when you practice, that's when you're practicing, whatever, or you're working on a lick. Next time on the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast, right? Whatever it might be, that's what you're practicing. If you practice that enough and develop it, it's no longer practice. It's part of your being. That's the trick, is you got to take things out of these buckets, right? The fundamental bucket or rudimentary bucket, the theory bucket, and the creative bucket. And at some point, they just become part of the way that you play. They're just part of when you grab a guitar and you hear music, and you know what I'm talking about because you do it right now. Maybe you don't do it a lot. Maybe you do it a ton. But you know what I'm talking about. When you grab the guitar, there's certain things that just come out. The problem is when we hit a wall and we go, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to approach this, or that's what this whole discussion, all of these discussions we've been having are all about. Or how do you approach it now when the music begins? What are you thinking about? Okay. So again, because I don't want to take up your entire day here, we're going to go on to another one. So now we're going to move on to the next one. This one is a Texas Shuffle in E. And again, it looks like the audio is pretty much the same volume, but let's just listen to it. Okay. So this is a Texas Shuffle in E. So we start the music. Very Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Okay, so I just wanted to listen all the way through to make sure it was a real 12-bar blues like we've talked about and there wasn't something weird there. So it's a 12-bar blues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. The difference here, of course, is that because it is a shuffle, we're dealing with dun, 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 the heartbeat, right? Remember, when you think of a shuffle or a swing, now this is a little bit faster in tempo, right? But that's our shuffle. Bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump. And what we're really doing there is a triplet. right? When you do bump, 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 what you're doing is a triplet. You're just skipping the middle part of the triplet because the triplet would be da 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 da. You're just skipping the middle one. Da 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 da. But in skipping that middle one, it creates the rhythm that we're hearing. And of course, it makes it a little bit easier for you to execute because you've got a little space in there. Okay? So again, am I practicing? Am I performing? Right? That's what I got to be thinking about here. So as I listen to the music here, and I'm in E, okay? So I'm going to just go up to the 12th fret here to keep things nice and straight. And I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to turn off my delay and reverb here. Okay, so that's what I've got with my rhythm here. Now, if I can, I could jump into the da 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 kind of rhythm. Right? Again, I'm not thinking about licks. I'm not thinking about melody, that sort of thing just yet. I'm just trying to figure out what can I do, right? What are the places on the fretboard that I could go if I chose to, right? So now let's dig into that a little bit more. So I'm using dun, 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 dun. Those are really the things I'm trying to focus on. And now I'm going to use the fretboard a little bit and try and utilize that phrasing thing I was just saying, right? So changing the sentence sizes. Sometimes I stop, sometimes I pause, right? That sort of thing. So let me start this again. And let's give it a try. Okay, turn on delay and reverb here. Right? So this brings up the next thing. In this rhythm, in this tempo, what feels really nice is repetition. And the ear loves repetition. Okay? That's why we have verses and choruses, especially choruses, right? It comes back and we feel like, oh, there we are again. Okay? So repetition can do that to us. Melody can do that to us as well, which we're going to talk about in another session coming up here. But repetition can do that for us. So as we're playing, we think about that repetition. So if I get in somewhere and I start going, well, sorry, let me be in the key of E here. That might help. Now, there's my creative bucket, or maybe it's my fundamental bucket where I need to practice that, right? But once I've established it and I've practiced it enough, it becomes part of what I can do when I play. And so if I'm on stage, this is, again, I'm not thinking about, when I'm on stage, my brain isn't full of 387 different thoughts. It isn't. It's just when I start playing, what I am is what comes out. And when I'm at home practicing, the trick that I have learned over the years is not to overwhelm my practice with 750 different things. Because if I do that, it's hard for any of it to become me, because there's so much. And it's so easy to forget half of it. I practice it and then I forget I was even practicing it, and then it's gone forever and it never comes back, right? Until I go, oh, I remember that thing from 7 years ago that I was working on. So for me, what I like to do is I like to find the good stuff that I consider good, right? That fits what I'm trying to do. And then I practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it until it becomes part of me, part of who I am. And then when I play, it comes out. So that's what I want you to be thinking about, okay? So that's what I would do with this shuffle, is I'm thinking it's in the key of A. Of course, I know it's 12-bar blues. I'm going to think about what I know about my fretboard and all the other things we've talked about, the tree, right? The quarter note, and then the blues shuffle, and then the triplet, right? I'm thinking about all of that. And if maybe I want to play and I want to do that triplet, but I'm not able to pick that fast. So then maybe what I do is I just start making a lick where I do pull-offs. right? Or something like that. Maybe you go, again, I want you to enjoy your practice and I want you to enjoy your journey. I'm not concerned whether or not you have the fastest licks or the greatest licks. They'll get there if you keep practicing. But you got to start somewhere. You got to start building things somewhere. You see? So that's the great thing is maybe you don't have all of the chops to do these triplets for 5 minutes straight, but maybe you can just make a lick and you're just using some pull-offs or some hammer-ons or something like that to build something that you think sounds cool, and you can use it in the context of this. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. And again, we talk about all this stuff in the creative blues soloing. There's all kinds of different stuff in there. Creative blues soloing, that course was intended to get you out of playing the same old positions, same old licks, same old tempo, same old groove. That's the point of creative blues soloing, is to break you out of that stuff. Okay? So Roger says, I'm still at grandpa speed. Nothing wrong with being at grandpa speed. Be creative at grandpa speed. That's the trick, right? And if you want to get to the next level, that's what all of the practice stuff is about. But again, you don't have to overwhelm yourself with 4 hours of just finger exercises. Let's be honest, everybody, right? If you're 15 and you have nothing else going on in your life, you could practice 8 hours a day. You really could, right? If you're 30 or 40 or 50 and you've got a family and you've got 2 jobs and you've got whatever, you may not have 8 hours a day to practice. My whole thing is instead of beating yourself up for it, why not just find the good stuff? Find the stuff that fits where you are. Have these upper level things that you want to reach, and that's awesome. But don't just rely on those. Figure out what works here, what works in the real world with where you are, okay? And then keep aspiring to get up here. That's what you need to do, okay? So let's move on to the next one here. Now this one is in B minor, so now we're moving back into minor. So as soon as I hear minor, I already know I'm not going to be using some of that major stuff. The like the major third, and I'm not using those really in the minor side. The minor side needs to be more dramatic, more melodic. And this says it's slow. So let's listen to it and see what we get here. Okay, this is slow, right? So this is really slow. So if you listen to it, we've got dun, 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 right? So because nothing in my genetic makeup wants to go that slow, the first thing I think about is doubling that speed. Dun, 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 ducka, 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 right? That's where I go, just because that's where I live, is a little bit faster than that. But there's nothing wrong with the speed. It's a great thing. Here's my point to this, is that I'll show you that in just a second here, but because it's so slow, I can almost sometimes disregard the groove entirely and just play disconnected to the groove. And I'm going to show you that in a second. So let's say I've got this going here, and I'm going to play within the tree, right? So I've got bum, 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 dun, 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 da, 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 da. That's my tree. I know it's a stupid term, but it just makes sense in my head. It's growing. So this is where that goes. So as I'm listening to this, dynamics, a great place for dynamics. You see? Now, Everything in my body wants to go to the next thing, which is what I want to show you right now, is disconnecting from that tree, disconnecting because it's so slow. I don't want to just play over it. So I'm disconnecting from the obligation of that quarter note, triplet, that sort of thing. And I just want to play. So now let's listen to this just a little bit. I'm going to disconnect a little bit and use both of these things. But let me show you the disconnection first. See, I'm not thinking about, because it's so slow, I'm not thinking about the triplet and that sort of thing. I'm just playing. I'm trying to create energy over this, okay? Sometimes, again, remember my ebb and flow thing, right? So sometimes I'm down here and I'm being really quiet. And then I'm trying to create some drama. I'm trying to create some energy, and then I bring it back down again. Now, the question would be on some of the earlier jams that I had, could I disconnect there? And the answer is absolutely. But here's the thing you got to be careful about. When you jam over music, if you're always disconnected, it sounds like you don't know what you're doing. And that's something that I did wrong as a kid, is I didn't do enough of that sort of fundamental practice. Because again, you might know what I mean. You can play certain things at a certain tempo on your metronome, but when it comes time to jam, it's hard to make them mold or fit into whatever it is you're jamming over. You have to learn how to do that to, again, with this tree, in whatever capacity you want to, okay? It doesn't have to be the fastest one or whatever all the time, but you've got to make a rhythmic connection. You've got to make a groove connection to music. You just have to. Because if you're always playing disconnected, it's kind of like playing in the wrong key. It's just going to, again, you might fool some people, but there's this organic thing that happens in music that we, you, me, we hear and we go, oh, that's music. Whether you want to call it good or not good or whatever it might be, you can tell when something's authentic. And making that connection to the groove creates that. There's still the melody side of things and stuff like that too, but the groove makes a big difference. So if you think about it when I'm playing, because this is so slow, it's easier for me to disconnect and create this, but that doesn't mean I never want to make a connection to that groove. Thank you. Rincon's Freaky says, you rule, you rule. So let's keep going. See, I can still make a connection, but then I might follow that up. See? So, and Doug, you're right. Doug says, just feel the music. And that is true, but that can't be defined. And the truth is when we feel music, and you do feel music, you should feel music, there still has to be things in there that make it exciting for the listener. Because I've always thought in my head, when I teach people, I always try and teach people from the context of someday you're going to play in front of people. Someday you're going to play, and maybe you won't, right? But if you think about it from that perspective, it makes it more real. And so the trick is you're not just trying to feel it for yourself. You're trying to find a way to make it so other people feel it as well when you play. Because again, we are legends in our own mind, right? And it really isn't about that. It's about, can we make something that's satisfying musically for other people if they were to listen to us? Are they feeling what we're feeling? Are we relating that to people? Okay. Jason says, better to play 10 notes with feeling than 100 notes without, but you can play 100 notes with feeling. See, that's the thing is the difference is for me, and not that we want to get into this whole thing, but it's harder to learn to play more articulate stuff. When you listen to Joe Bonamassa or Stevie Ray Vaughan or anybody like that, they had frickin' chops. Like Stevie Ray Vaughan had massive chops. He just didn't always use it. But it's not like he just always played slow because there's more feel and more whatever in slow. That's not true. Stevie Ray Vaughan could rip it up with the best of them, but it was an ebb and flow thing. He would figure out when's the best time to do which, right? When's it best to just lay it all out there, and when's it best to pull back a little bit, and you respond to the music that way, you see? And there's something really beautiful about being able to do that on your guitar when you've got the freedom on your fretboard and you've got the freedom of knowledge, and most importantly, you've got the freedom of being able to listen and respond. You're listening and you're responding. So think about that a little bit. And then just finally, because I do want to get going here and I want you to get going with your life, I don't want to take too much of your time. Here's another one. This one's in G minor. This one's slow, but it's not as slow. Let's listen to this real quick. Turn that down a little bit. See how long we were on that first chord? We were on G minor for a long time. So it's not, the chords aren't supplying the energy. The chords are just very straightforward, right? And we have that G minor for a long time. So we're the one that has to supply that energy. You see? So Jason says Andy Timmons. Andy Timmons is one of my absolute favorite guitar players in the world. I love Andy Timmons. Super nice guy, super great player. Yeah, I mean, it does have a bit of a Pink Floyd feel, doesn't it? So, okay, so let's just take this for a second and let me just think about this. So, again, dun, 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 dun. It's a triplet, right? So I'm in G. Now you see, sometimes I play a little bit more, right? But then I got to back that off a little bit. I got to pull back a little bit, or maybe it's in my phrasing. Maybe I need a little more lower register versus the higher register, that sort of thing. And then right there, maybe that's a good spot for me to just really let loose with those 100 notes versus one note, right? To really build this energy and then bring it back down again. Just ebb and flow, right? So that's the trick to all of this stuff. I'm not saying that that's for you, okay? Yeah. So somebody just mentioned, you didn't use your name, but somebody just mentioned the connect versus disconnect. Totally happening in this one. Totally happening. Where sometimes I'm connecting, sometimes I'm disconnecting, right? That's the way I like to play. It doesn't matter if it's the way you like to play, right? You might think, well, I would do whatever. Well, good, then that's what you should do, right? I'm not changing me for you, and I don't want you to change you for me, right? I want you to find what works good for you. So when you play, you're feeling it, right? You're not saying you're feeling it, you're feeling it. Because that's where the energy is. That's where the electricity is, okay? It's not in us trying to sell our, and when I say sell, again, I don't mean financially. I mean, when we play for somebody, we don't have to explain afterwards why we did what we did because they weren't getting it, right? We want them to walk away going, wow, that worked for me, right? And that to me, I've always used the term authentic. Authentic to me isn't pro or intermediate. I don't even use those terms. Authentic is just when you play and people hear you, they go, yep, that sounds like it's supposed to sound. Okay? That's what music to me is all about. It doesn't matter if it's country, rock, pop, jazz, blues, metal. That's what it is when you listen, you go, yep, that's exactly what should be there, right? So that's what I want you to think about. Anyway, so let's go ahead and we'll stop there because we're going on just about 50 minutes here, and I want you to get back to your life. Friday, I'll be going live again. Dan may be on this with me. I'm not sure. We're still figuring that out, but I'm going to go live again. We're going to talk about some more blues stuff, hopefully help you. If you haven't watched some of the other live sessions, please do so. If you haven't taken a look at the Creative Blues Soloing course, please take a look at it, see if it's something that you're interested in. Elias says we need a metal course. We do, and there's definitely one coming in 2021, okay? So everybody, I love metal too, so that's something else we'll talk about further down the line. But anyway, everybody take care, stay positive, keep practicing. Next time on the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast.
Guys, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Let's get on with it. Steve, thanks for having me today, man. I appreciate it. Let me jump on here with you. This obviously is about licks today, blues licks. All right, Steve, I'll let you take it away, my friend.
Well, we've talked about a lot of different things, and I did show you some different licks trying to kind of utilize the major and the minor and how we talked about all that in the last session. Actually, 2 sessions ago. Last session, we were talking about some phrasing ideas and things like that. Well, now what we're going to do is we're just going to start trying to add in some actual licks. So what I did was I just kind of went back and looked at some ideas that work for major and some ideas that work more predominantly for, now again, they're both for major 1-4-5, major 12-bar blues like we've talked about, but emphasizing the minor pentatonic versus the major pentatonic. So we've got some different licks to look at with that. And then I've got a cool thing that I wanted to explain to you too about how to, in the last session when we were talking about phrasing, I was talking about how you really need to be aware of the next chord that's coming. So I've got a couple of different ideas that I want to give you on, let's say you're moving from the 1 to the 4 chord. What are you going to do differently when you know that that 4 chord is coming versus just staying on the 1? You know, maybe you're in the middle of a 4-measure sequence of the 1 chord and you're doing a particular lick. What are you going to do versus being on the last measure of that 4-measure sequence and now you know that 4 chord is coming? What might you do differently? So that's what we're going to be doing. So the first lick we're going to do, I was thinking about the Blues Brothers, and that's where this came from. And then I was like, well, Blues Brothers is Chicago, and the song is Sweet Home Chicago, but I'm doing Texas blues. But anyway, I digress. So here's what we got is we're going to be doing this. So let's just look at that little idea there of this. That right there, that idea.